Hi, and welcome to Africa Weekly, covering the key stories from November 10th through the 14th. Coming up this week, a powerful economic blockade has Mali's economy on the brink. We're also seeing Russia launch a massive diplomatic offensive across the continent, and a stunning new investigation uncovers a multi-billion-dollar fuel smuggling ring that's absolutely crippling Libya's finances. We're going to break all of this down and more. All right, first up, let's dive into the escalating security crises in the Sahel and the deepening political turmoil in Sudan.
So, in the Sahel, the Al-Qaeda affiliate known as Jinim is really stepping up its campaign in a dramatic way. Now, the group is led by this fascinating and frankly dangerous figure, Iyad Agali. He's got quite a backstory, a former Tuareg rebel leader, even a Malian diplomat who was once known for his love of rock music, a far cry from where he is now, having adopted a radical ideology. Today, they call him the strategist, and believe me, he is putting that name to the test.
And what's truly remarkable here is the strategy they're using. Jinim has moved way beyond typical insurgency tactics. We're talking about full-blown economic warfare. They've blockaded these vital trade corridors in western Mali, and the goal is simple: to choke the entire national economy. This really signals a major shift in how these groups operate, using economic pressure as their primary weapon. They're even demanding companies get their permission to operate, and get this, they're coordinating these incredibly sophisticated operations using Elon Musk's Starlink.
And the impact? Well, it's been immediate and absolutely severe. The fuel shortages from this blockade got so bad that the Malian government had no choice but to shut down every single school and university for 2 full weeks. That right there tells you just how deep this crisis goes. So, with this crisis getting deeper by the day, what's the geopolitical response? Well, a high-level Russian military delegation flew right into Bamako, their official mission to reinforce Russia's security partnership with Mali's government and to figure out a strategy to counter this growing threat. Okay, now let's shift gears over to Sudan. Kenyan President William Ruto has just offered a really blunt assessment of the conflict there. He's basically arguing that the two warring factions, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, are just two sides of the same coin. He put it plainly: neither of the generals leading them can solve this crisis. Why? Because in his words, the root problem is one of governance, not just a military fight.
Meanwhile, Sudan's military leadership, they're pointing fingers abroad. General Yasser al-Attah has come out and accused the United Arab Emirates of financing the RSF rebels. And he says it's all part of a bigger scheme to plunder Sudan's wealth and deliberately turn the country into a regional hub of chaos and conflict.
All right, so from the shifting sands of the Sahel, we're now turning to the diplomatic front lines. This is where global and regional powers are actively working to shape their influence all across the continent.
And Russia has been incredibly busy this week. We've seen high-level meetings with Benin, Sierra Leone, and Madagascar. But the undeniable focus? That was Egypt. You had Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu meeting with President Sisi to talk about major strategic projects, while at the same time, Foreign Minister Lavrov was finalizing all the details for the big upcoming Russia-Africa conference.
And the single most crucial takeaway from those talks in Cairo is this date: November 19th. That's the day they're set to lay the foundation stone for the first power unit of the massive Russian-built Ba'a nuclear power plant. This isn't just a building, it's cementing a long-term strategic and technological partnership.
Now, in stark contrast, some recent U.S. diplomatic moves have been raising a few eyebrows. First, a high-profile visit to Kenya by Vice President J.D. Vance was just canceled, abruptly. And maybe even more controversially, the U.S. sent $7.5 million to Equatorial Guinea, one of the world's most repressive regimes, in exchange for them accepting deportees. It's a move that has human rights groups and even some U.S. lawmakers really alarmed. Okay, let's move on to some critical issues of governance, corruption, and the very real human cost of some of these political and economic policies. Let's start with a number that's just staggering: $20 billion. According to a brand new report from the investigative group Century, that is the estimated cost to the Libyan people from state-sanctioned fuel smuggling. And that's just over 3 years, between 2022 and 2024. So how on earth does a scheme like this even work? Well, the report breaks it down. It's a systematic thing. Libya imports refined fuel, right? It's for its own citizens, at heavily subsidized prices. But here's the catch. Corrupt officials and these powerful elites, what the report calls kleptocrats, they work with criminal networks to divert more than half of it. This stolen fuel is then smuggled abroad, generating these enormous profits for a tiny group of people while creating massive shortages for ordinary Libyans.
You know, the risks for whistleblowers on the continent can be tragically high. Take this story from the Democratic Republic of Congo. A conservationist exposed an illegal palm oil plantation inside a protected marine park, a plantation allegedly owned by the former president, Joseph Kabila. The reprisal was just brutal. Armed men stormed his home, they staged a mock execution, and they raped his wife right in front of their young son.
That harrowing story really highlights the extreme vulnerability that individuals can face. Now, a different kind of vulnerability is being explored in a new investigation, this one into an EU-funded program that's supposed to help African migrants voluntarily return home. The program promises support, reintegration, but interviews with people who went through it tell a very different story. Many say they were just left abandoned, traumatized, and deep in debt, with little or no follow-up. It's raising some serious questions about the program's accountability.
All right, let's shift now to the continent's economic landscape, where themes like trade, resource control, and energy independence are really taking center stage.
On the trade front, we've got some interesting data coming out of Russia's port of Novorossiysk. It shows some pretty significant agricultural imports from Africa. In just the first 10 months of this year, over 14,000 tons of products, we're talking oranges, tea, tomatoes, were inspected. And the biggest supplier by far, Egypt.
Now, this is a huge development for natural resources. Botswana's president has just declared that the country is actively moving to acquire a controlling stake in De Beers. Yes, the De Beers, the iconic diamond company. This is a move that could fundamentally shift the entire balance of power in the global diamond industry. It's a massive step towards resource sovereignty for the nation.
And now for a quick roundup of some other key stories that have been making headlines across the continent this week.
First up, in Ghana, a truly historic moment, as more than 130 priceless Ashanti artifacts, looted during the colonial era, are being returned from collections in Britain and Switzerland. Over in Somaliland, we have a clear declaration of sovereignty, as the government announced it will no longer recognize visas issued by Somalia. In Nigeria, a major arrest at the Lagos airport, where authorities captured a notorious drug kingpin as he was trying to flee the country. And looking to the future, Ethiopia has officially been chosen to host the major UN climate summit, COP32 in 2027.
So when you look at everything, from Mali's security crisis to Botswana's bold bid for its own diamonds, you really see a continent at a crossroads. As global powers deepen their engagement, and as African nations push harder for greater control, the big question remains: are we witnessing the dawn of a new era of self-determination, or is this just a new chapter in an old story of great power competition? Goodbye,